What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Everybody knows what today is. The 53-man roster has officially been announced. The Pittsburgh Steelers, their initial roster is set in place, and I apologize that we're a couple minutes late, but if you guys couldn't tell, it's as crazy as it gets right now for anybody covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you guys, I tried as fast as I could. With that said, Nick, I can tell you how I am. Chaotic. How are you?
I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm learning Boston Scott's potentially going to the Steelers practice squad as we're hitting live and hitting go live on the stream. So yeah, it is a day. It is a day that anybody in the content creation or in the sports journalism world looks at and says, well, this is a day where I will not be human. So let's not be human for the next 45 minutes with everybody else that's on the stream.
It's a good time. It's as fun as it gets. I sent a little message to everybody in the group chat this morning, just saying like, hey, this is what we live for. This is what we're here for. It is as crazy and as wild of a time as you could possibly have in the NFL. The Pittsburgh Steelers themselves just cut 37 players. And they're a team that they kind of wait. They wait until the end, and it makes it more chaotic, but it gives them the final look at this team and really allows them to solidify. These are the guys we want to keep. These are the guys that have earned a spot last minute, so on and so forth. It was a crazy day. And while there weren't a million surprises, there were certainly a few. For those of you who have not been caught up to date, the Pittsburgh Steelers announced their 53-man roster. On top of that, they placed Jeremiah Moon and Julius Welschof on injured reserve. Julius Welschof is shut down for the season. Jeremiah Moon is eligible to return. Ryan Watts is also shut down for the season. A bit of a shocker there. A guy that was, quote unquote, just a stinger after the game in Detroit. Didn't expect him to be on season-ending IR, which is pretty massive. And then Dylan Cook goes on the 4-week IR, or at least the beginning of the 4-week IR, and we'll go from there. When it comes to the 53-man itself, Scotty Miller makes the team. Des Fitzpatrick does not. And I think the biggest name that surprised everybody is Jalen Elliott, who sneaks his way on there. Beanie Bishop makes the roster. Thomas Graham does not make the roster. I didn't see that one coming. Jack Coletto doesn't make the team. I think by the end of it, we all saw that one coming. Your biggest surprise from this roster, I think mine was Jalen Elliott, and I'll dive into it here in a second.
Yeah, mine was the fact that they're keeping 5 inside linebackers. Both Mark Robinson and Tyler Matakevich make the Steelers 53-man roster. That's obviously to help out with special teams. And they basically said, listen, we trust DeMarvin Leal to be that 4th outside linebacker. And to me, this signals they trust Nick Herbig to be a very big role for them, being that single alternate at the outside linebacker position. Obviously, they can go out and add guys still. They can make some moves, but this signals to me that they have a lot of faith in Nick Herbig, going with only 3 outside linebackers on the initial 53 and going with 5 inside linebackers, both Mark Robb and Tyler Matakevich.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on DeMarvin Leal, but obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers have big hopes in DeMarvin Leal and what he could possibly bring to this team, but he's expected to be the 4th guy now. It'll be Nick Herbig. And don't get me wrong, like the Steelers only typically utilize 3 guys. Last year to utilize 4 was pretty... It was just a nice bonus for the Steelers. It wasn't anything crazy where they usually only have 4 of those guys. But I agree with you. I expected them to keep somebody. I thought it was going to be Kyron Johnston just because of his special teams ability. When it comes to me, it's Jalen Elliott. And I can't tell if I was wrong, if the Steelers were wrong. I have no idea. Because in minicamp and OTAs, I'm telling you guys, Jalen Elliott looks good, man. Jalen Elliott's a sleeper. You got to start watching this kid. I think he's got a shot to make the roster. And then he gets cut, and you're looking at it going, okay, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the Steelers have a different thought than I do. Where do we currently stand? And then he comes back in training camp. At this point, you're thinking there's no shot. And then here he is. He makes the 53-man roster. I just did not see that coming. I mean, it speaks volumes of what they think of this guy. I'll say this. The safety position, I expect to change. I expect the corner and the safety room to look a little bit different in the next 24 to 48 hours or so, which is what we'll dive into next. There weren't many surprises, but I expect more moves to be made. And I expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to look a lot of different ways for guys who are now available. Obviously, wide receiver is the big one. And there are some names out there. I'll give you guys my list of candidates that I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will, could, and possibly should look at over the next day or so to try and boost their offense and their wide receiver room. And don't get me wrong, I'm not upset with keeping Scotty Miller. I look at Scotty Miller as a valuable asset who could do a lot of things. I think the Steelers need a gunner, but I look at Scotty Miller as a guy that could make this team just a little bit more reliable when it comes to that slot position, especially if Roman Wilson isn't going to be ready for week 1. Here are my names. Noah Brown highlights that list. I mean, I think he's the only one of the entire group that is healthy, available, reliable, and could probably fill a bigger role than the Pittsburgh Steelers have currently. That being said, I don't look at him as an upgrade over Van Jefferson. He's not an upgrade over Van Jefferson. I think that's the biggest thing we got to get out here is I don't believe there is an upgrade over Van Jefferson when you look at who's available just simply on the market right now. I didn't see anybody get cut. You could talk about Terrence Marshall. You could talk about Tim Patrick. You could talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones or Noah Brown. They're all good names. I don't think any of them have a higher bar than Van Jefferson. Maybe they add a little bit more boost. Maybe some of them have a little bit more upside, but I don't think any of them are better than Van Jefferson currently in their career. There are names that I think have a little bit more potential, and I'll tell you one that snuck his way through there that not many people are talking about, and I think potentially they should. And he's from Kansas City, and his name is not Kadarius Toney. What would you do if the Steelers signed Kadarius Toney? What would your thoughts be?
I would probably disassociate from everything for a solid 3 or 4 hours. Just seeing that. Obviously, this is a guy that has a lot of talent, but his issues on the field have been extensively known by everybody, not just in the Kansas City fan base. So I would hope the Steelers don't see that as their answer. I don't think they do either.
No, there's no chance, but I think it'd be hilarious if he, me and you have talked and it would be funny. Kadarius Toney is a dude who I have yelled at the television many times because I took a shot on him early in fantasy football last year, and I've never regretted anything more in my football life. I don't think anybody outside of Noah Brown really boosts this room too high. Justin Ross is a name that I would think about. I would look at him and say, he had potential. It definitely fell off. And I don't think that he was a guy that should have gotten drafted any higher, or I guess he was undrafted. So I don't think he was a guy that should have gotten drafted very high or comes to the NFL with the superstar potential. But at one point, somebody saw that, and then he dealt with a bunch of injuries, couldn't stay healthy. If the Steelers could get him for nothing and take a shot on him, why not? And worst case scenario, you bring him back to, or another scenario, you bring him back to your practice squad. I think that works out very well. The Steelers have to do two things in my opinion, and they have to get a wide receiver that is available to be a gunner on special teams, and Miles Boykin is my favorite right now in that category. I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers bringing Miles Boykin back. He doesn't do anything offensively, but he provides a weapon on special teams, and gunner is one of the most important positions on the field. There were a lot of people in this live stream over the last couple of weeks talking about how bad the special teams were. You need a Miles Boykin. Second, you need a guy who could move the needle just a little bit. And Tim Patrick and Noah Brown are my cut guys who I say, all right, if I'm going to go get somebody, those are going to be the two I'm going to get. The other one is probably John Mechie, who Alan Saunders of Steelers Now reports they have called about, and they've reached out to see if they could get him. I think with Houston cutting Noah Brown, it probably signals that John Mechie is not available for a trade right now unless you really blow them away, and I don't think the Steelers are looking to blow them away, but I'd go take a chance on a Tim Patrick. I would go take a chance on a Noah Brown. I don't think I would do the same with a Terrence Marshall. I don't feel very good about a Terrence Marshall. I don't feel very good about I've talked about little Jordan Humphreys, but I think that Tim Patrick's better. I think that Noah Brown's better. That's kind of where my bar would be, is if I could go get one of those two guys, I'd feel pretty confident about the situation. Anybody else, I think that you essentially have that player in Van Jefferson, but he's not going to do much. There's nobody really on the market that's crazy. On the other side of the football, unless you have other names, do you have other wide receivers?
No, the one thing I'll say about Tim Patrick, even though he does have a pretty high ceiling, he hasn't really played much football lately.
Yes.
He's been injured. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. And that's why I think it lends to his ceiling isn't quite, it's not higher than what Van Jefferson already brings. So where I bring in another one, that's kind of my thoughts on Tim Patrick. So I would probably lean more towards Noah Brown in that argument. But other than that, no, I think those two are the two top names on the market. But again, there's going to be other teams looking for him as well.
Yeah, exactly. And at 30 years old, Tim Patrick doesn't strike me as a guy who this is going to get much crazier. The other side of the ball is where things get very interesting. In my opinion, very interesting. I think the Steelers should call, and there's a lot of Martavis Bryants in there. Look, at Martavis Bryant would be fun. The Pittsburgh Steelers, anybody who's watched the Pittsburgh Steelers long enough understands they're not going to call him. Like, he's not a guy that they're going to be like, oh, let's go get Martavis Bryant, because that relationship ended very well and he did great things for us. And, there were no troubles. That's not going to happen. On the other side of the ball, it gets a lot more exciting, to be honest. There are two names that stick out, maybe more than most, and then a third that I think you could go get if you're looking to replace Darius Rush. But my big one is I don't think Beanie Bishop should be the only guy in the slot. And don't get me wrong, a guy who's going to play nickel, which means that he's going to be on the field half the time for half the season, probably the least concerning name the Pittsburgh Steelers could have. And everybody wants to talk about like, oh, well, you can't have a hole. Teams are going to exploit that hole. Everybody's got a hole. Every team has a hole that an offense will try to exploit. The Steelers is nickel right now, and I think that you'd be totally okay if Beanie was your guy and he played very limited snaps throughout the season, and you'd be fine. But if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers, or were the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'd call two names that I think I'd sign to the 53-man roster, and then I'd sign one name to the practice squad, and I would feel very good about the entire situation. And to be honest, if you're going to sign the third guy to your 53-man roster and make him a nickel instead of a safety, I'd feel good about it too. My first name at corner is Shaun Wade, former New England Patriot, former Ohio State guy. Mike Tomlin loved this kid. Loved him coming out of Ohio State. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I was almost 100% certain he was coming to Pittsburgh when he was coming out of college. Didn't happen. Ended up in New England. He's a great slot corner. Doesn't provide much versatility to the outside, and he's transitioning to the inside. Like, that's the biggest thing about him is Ohio State tried to force him to play the outside. Now he's got to learn the inside more, and he's taking steps forward, but the Steelers love this guy. He's physical. He's lengthy. I think he works well in what the Steelers are looking to do, and he's competition. He's not guaranteed anything, but you could bring him in here and say he's young. Let's work with him. Let's see if he's a better fit than Beanie Bishop. My second two, and this one's exciting. This one's my exciting one. Lewis Cine, man. I was the biggest Lewis Cine guy coming out of college. Georgia Bulldog, absolute animal coming out of college. Like, he was a dude where if he hit you, I was pretty convinced you just lost years off your life. That's how physical he was coming out of college. I loved him. I think he could come in here and play the slot. I think he could come in here and play safety. He's obviously better than Jalen Elliott. And I like Jalen Elliott, but he's obviously better than Jalen Elliott. Lewis Cine is a dude in my head I'm calling immediately. Like, why not? Why are you not trying to go get that guy? Especially if he's your fifth safety that you're going to get for literally nothing. I mean, that sounds like a move to me. I get it. He's dealt with some injuries. He's got to trust his body. They're saying that he's got a little bit of some Devin Bush syndrome where he's getting hurt and now he's not playing as well because he's having a hard time getting back out there and being 100%. I'm still taking a shot on a Lewis Cine. The second name is Terrell Edmunds. I mean, why not? Why are you not calling Terrell Edmunds? Like, is there a problem there? No. I think he's a fit for the Steelers, plays better in the box than he does playing back at safety. He knows Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, why not? Why not give him a call? Say, we'll give you literally no money. Come back to Pittsburgh where you get an opportunity and work in the slot. I mean, why not? I think it works. If you're going to put Deshaun Elliott there, if you're going to put DeMonte KZ there, why not have another guy in Terrell Edmonds? I mean, I just think it makes sense. I'd go Lewis Cine before I win any of those guys, but I think all three of those guys make a lot of sense for the Steelers.
Yeah, you're looking at a roster right now where they would have wished probably that Beanie just ran with this and it wasn't even a conversation. It was a little bit of a competition towards the end there. And I think part of that is that Beanie was injured. And that's not to say Beanie can't come out here and run away with it from week 1 on. But I think the big thing that you're looking at right now is if you're the Steelers, especially with a guy like Terrell Edmonds, it's the Bud Dupree syndrome. It's familiar, so it's comfortable. It's not really comfortable going with the UDFA as your starter in week 1. So I think that the Steelers made this decision for a reason. I think that they went with Beanie Bishop because it's a little out of the norm for them. Typically they're not, hey, let's give the young guy, throw him into the fire, give him all the reps. That's what they did with Beanie. And he didn't stand the test too much in the preseason games. But I do think that when you're looking at this, it's a situation where, again, not everybody is impenetrable and bulletproof on the defensive side. That might just be something they have to live with if they're not able to go out and get these guys. But there are some options there and I think Edmonds is the one that's probably most likely because that seems like a Steelers move to bring him back. But there's going to be a lot of conversations over the next couple of days, especially with that nickel corner position, because when you look at their secondary, specifically corner, that's what 4 of the 5 guys that are on this roster that are first or second year guys. That is a risky proposition for a team that has lofty goals.
Yes, especially guys that didn't really do a ton. Corey Trice is dealing with a groin injury. Like, there are just too many questions right now to say we're very comfortable with where we're at and the Steelers will stick with what they've got. The Steelers roster is always changing, and they're like almost always making moves at the roster cut line. Almost always. And they will continue to, but this is, I think the most important thing here is people have to realize that they have to put a 53-man roster out at 4:00. Like, they have to. They don't get a chance to say, oh, well, we'll wait for everybody else and then we'll put our 53-man. They have to, which means that this roster is not what they want it to be. It's what they have to make it right now. Everybody else was just, let's just trim the fat. And then from here on, we will try to find the rest of these names. Beanie, I think, is somebody who they wanted to keep, but I don't know if he's here if a better option presents itself. And names like Shaun Wade, names like Lewis Cine, names like Terrell Edmonds are better names than Beanie Bishop. And they're not the best, but they're better names than Beanie Bishop. I mean, dude, Trey Flowers just got released. I'd go get Trey Flowers. I'd feel fine, especially if you could say, Trey Flowers, you're going to play in the slot. I'd feel very good about that situation. I mean, we were talking about Patrick Peterson for months. Immediately, the market got better with who got cut in the last hour or so. So I look at the slot corner as one that will change. I look at wide receiver as one that will change. And I probably look at safety as one that's going to change as well over the next, I don't know, anywhere from the next couple of hours to the next couple of days for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Crazy times. I think a lot is coming next, but we could sit here and guess forever. I know you guys have questions, so let's start answering questions. If you guys have more, if you guys got names that you want to talk about, let me know. Toss them in the chat. We'll dive into all of them. What do we got?
Yeah, let's start off with Marlon Loon Lewis, who says, if we need another wide receiver, would you call Terrace Marshall Jr.?
I think he'd be like 4th on my list. I think the Terrace Marshall Jr. hype was good like 2 years ago. And where we're at now, it's like, okay, like, you get it. We got it's the Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson had hype. That hype has failed or has fallen. And this is where we are. That's Terrace Marshall. Like, that's right. I'd call Paris Campbell. I'd call Donovan Peoples-Jones. I'd call Tim Patrick. I would call Justin Ross, all before I would call Noah Brown, all before I would call Terrace Marshall.
We got a couple questions from Chris that we're going to jump to. Let's start with this one. Could one of our safeties, like a guy like DeMonte KZ, play in the slot cornerback role?
Yeah, if I had to guess, the Steelers are going to go Deshaun Elliott in the nickel, KZ at safety for when they need to, unless something changes. But that would be their role right now. Both of those guys could play in the slot. Minka could play in the slot. I think keeping Beanie was more of a Beanie's got potential, and we might have something in Beanie, and there's no chance he's going to end up on our practice squad. So we might as well keep him around. You got to keep him safe and safe on your roster, and I think that's what they did here.
Chris has another one here that we'll jump to. Says, should the Steelers have signed Justin Simmons when they had the chance?
When they had the chance, I mean, back in March, April, yeah. But he's in. Where is it? Atlanta? They'll meet him week 1.
A couple weeks,
yeah, dude. Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates is just a crazy, crazy duo, but they got a good one.
Let's go over to Dalton's question next. Says, Windman, Coletto, and Dez Fitzpatrick all cut. Are you shocked about Ward and P. Ryan being cut? So I guess they're rolling with 3 running backs.
I mean, Cordero Patterson, in my eyes, earned himself that final roster spot and kind of quieted any noise that the Steelers had about keeping a 4th in that 3rd preseason game. Windman getting cut, Coletto getting cut. I think I saw those coming. Dez Fitzpatrick and Scotty Miller were right on the verge, neck and neck. I saw Scotty being the guy. He was just more consistent throughout training camp in the preseason. I figured he was going to be the guy they rolled with. Wasn't super shocked. I think the biggest shock for me was only keeping 3 outside linebackers and keeping Jalen Elliott, because I just did not see coming at all.
Let's go to Marlon's question next. He says, is it a good or bad thing that over half the roster is different compared to last year? What are your thoughts on continuity year to year with these rosters?
I mean, sometimes it's good, but the Pittsburgh Steelers bring the continuity as they come, keep it the same as they come, and, well, it's done nothing for them. So you might as well change it up. I think it's good. I think it's a good opportunity for a lot of new guys. I think a lot of fresh faces. I think guys were getting old. That's my biggest thing, is guys were getting old. Time to move on. But I feel very good about the Steelers roster overall. So I feel fine about it.
Let's go over to Dalton's next question. He says, do you think it's worth a shot going after Tanner Muse again? He was cut earlier today.
At inside linebacker, no. In my opinion, that doesn't make sense anymore. You have Peyton Wilson. He's a much better Tanner Muse. You have Tyler Matakevich. He's a much better special teamer than Tanner Muse. Mark Robinson's a good special teamer. So I would say no. I feel good. To be honest, I feel really good about the inside linebacker position. And the fact that Cole Holcomb's just on the PUP list and don't get me wrong, I don't expect Cole Holcomb to play this season, but the fact that they left that window open makes me feel even better.
Let's go over to Vibing with the Dogs, who says Ricky Stromberg is available and the Steelers need a backup center. What are your thoughts?
No, this is a great one. I appreciate you tossing this name out there, because I almost forgot about Ricky Stromberg. I can't believe that guy got cut. I mean, worst case scenario, he's a swing guard / backup center, but he held starting ground for that team. So I don't get it. I think that's a great addition if the Pittsburgh Steelers could snag him up. I mean, you're loading yourself up on interior linemen when you need an outside guy, but I think it takes some pressure off of Spencer Anderson to have to play center and guard and tackle, and maybe you could just make him a tackle. If Troy Fautana's coming back, I don't know. I feel good about it. Stromberg's a good one. He's a good backup, a good young backup center that I think would work well behind Zach Frazier and could give you more years than Nate Herbig was going to.
Let's go over to PJ's question, which is Jalen Elliott a special teamer? Because he got burned on defense on multiple occasions.
Yeah, he is a special teamer. I thought he looked good at times on on defense as well. He did get burned a couple of times. I think the move is more so potential slot guy / special teamer. But if we're going to be 100% honest, I think he's the 53rd guy, and I'm not convinced he's around in a couple of days.
There have been a lot of people that have jumped in the chat and missed our initial conversation on him. So let's ask about this one again. Big Mabe says, tell me we aren't getting Kadarius Toney. The Steelers can't be targeting him, right? There's a lot of other people in the chat that are asking the same thing.
I don't think that Kadarius Toney is an option for the Steelers. I mean, maybe if they're feeling it, but they've somewhat held off on handing everything in their mother to San Francisco for Brandon Ayuk, and part of that has been they're a little worried about his character. Kadarius Toney brings problems. He brings lack of, I mean, hands, I guess, to a roster. I mean, if you're playing running back as a first round pick at wide receiver, you're clearly not especially in Kansas City. Like, if you can't make it work in Kansas City as a wide receiver, what are you doing? So I would say no. I would be very shocked if he ends up in Pittsburgh.
Jacob says, we need John Mechie. Have the Steelers been in talks with the Texans for the young receiver?
There are reports that say that the Steelers have been in talks with the Houston Texans, or at least made a phone call. The way I look at it is, you cut Noah Brown, you made it clear that John Mechie's part of this team. And I just don't know if those trade talks are going to go anywhere, or if the Texans are going to give them any light. So I would guess right now Mechie's very on the outside looking in, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, the worst thing that could have happened to the Steelers is Mechie having the good preseason that he did, because then the Texans all of a sudden valued him more.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to the next question here. Hey, fellas, thanks for hopping on live to discuss the 53-man roster. In your opinion, who is the first of this 53 to get removed if the Steelers decide to trade or sign another wide receiver or defensive back?
I would go Jalen Elliott is probably the top of my list. Scotty Miller's number 2. If I had to guess, those would be the guys that I think are the 53rd, 52nd guys on this roster. And then the Steelers will go from there. But if I had to guess, it's those two, just because, Jalen Elliott, I didn't get that one. And if they add wide receivers, Scotty Miller's probably the guy to go.
Let's go over to X Concepts, who says, Noah, can you explain the IR designations? Is Ryan Watts not able to return at all this year?
Yeah, so they shut Ryan Watts down for the season. So you could either place a guy on like the return eligible IR or designated to return, or you could just place him on IR and it's season ending. And Ryan Watts and Julius Welshoff both went on season ending IR, while Jeremiah Moon and Dylan Cook went on designated to return IR, which means that in 4 weeks they could come back. But yes, Ryan Watts is done for the year.
Let's go to the next question here. When do we think Ayuk is off the table for the Steelers? And what do you guys think the chances are they bring in Noah Brown?
So I don't know, because Adam Schefter is saying, oh, this could go into week 1. I don't know. I think at some point the Steelers are going to pull back. I think that's already started to happen, and we'll see what happens come week 1. I wouldn't imagine it goes much further than week 1. They'll probably keep an offer out there, but they won't do anything crazy with it or up their offer. But I would imagine like week 1-ish is when the Steelers start to say like, look, we got our guys. And the more moves that they make in the coming days, the less likely it is they get Ayuk. Noah Brown, I think, is an option for them. If I had to guess, they're making a move at wide receiver. If I had to guess, they might make 2 wide receiver moves. I just think Noah Brown tops that list, and I think you could get a smaller name like Miles Boykin to come in here and play special teams, because they also desperately need a gunner. Miles Boykin's as good as it gets as a special teamer in the NFL.
PJ wants to know, did they keep Logan Lee because they couldn't sneak him onto the practice squad?
Yeah. If I had to guess, that would be the case. That was my prediction, like why he made the 53-man roster in my prediction. It'd be tough to get him onto the practice squad. I don't think it would have worked in their favor. I think somebody would have scooped him up.
PJ has another question here, wants to know, does Jacoby Windman make the practice squad? And also, do you have any predictions for who else could?
So far all we know is Boston Scott, which is a phenomenal practice squad addition. You'd have to guess Jonathan Ward makes the team because they really liked him. I thought he almost made the roster. You'd imagine Dez Fitzpatrick comes back and he's on the practice squad as well if somebody doesn't scoop him up on their 53-man roster. Who else would probably make this team? Thomas Graham, I would guess, makes this practice squad.
You'd probably another guy, you would think?
No, he's IR. He's gone.
Oh, that's right.
He's done. Yeah, in injury designation. I would imagine you bring on some sort of outside linebacker help to the practice squad just in case, whether that's Kyron Johnson or somebody else. But I would imagine Kyron Johnson gets scooped up around a 53-man roster after this offseason. Those would be my big ones. And then Jack Coletto as well. I would imagine Jack Coletto makes it back. And then hopefully John Rice Plumlee, because I'm just hoping, man. I'm just hoping.
Wesley Smith wants to know, wild question, do you think Darnell Washington could be a short-term solution for some of the O-line depth issues? Maybe keep him out there as support while some of these guys get healthier.
I mean, maybe, but I don't think the Steelers are thin, but they still have starters. So I think they'll be fine. And I think Troy Fautanu is going to start working his way back to full go, be ready to go earlier in the season. And there won't be much issue there. But I would say the Steelers are pretty good where they're at. Spencer Anderson, it's not ideal to make him your third outside tackle right now, but you could do it, worst case scenario. But they also have Michael Pruitt. They have Darnell Washington, like you said. They have Connor Hayward, Pat Freiermuth. They could play multiple tight end sets, avoid another tackle. I think they will do that. So I think you're right where it's that they'll utilize Darnell a little bit more as a blocker in those circumstances. But I think they'll do that all season.
Let's move over to James Grammer, who asks, any chance Cortland Sutton becomes available again?
No. If you look at the Denver Broncos wide receiver moves, they got rid of Tim Patrick and they got rid of Jerry Jeudy and they got rid of little Jordan Humphreys. They cleared the space for Cortland Sutton to be their guy, and then Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims and those guys to be their backups. So they made it very clear that Cortland's their dude. Plus they paid him. So I would say almost no chance he becomes available again this season.
Good question on the Steelers' 53-man roster here, saying, other than running back and linebacker, what would you say is the Steelers' strongest position group after the cuts?
Oh, defensive tackle or defensive line, I guess, with ease. I mean, Isaiah Loudermilk took a massive step forward over the last 2 years. Like, I'm very impressed with where Isaiah Loudermilk is right now. DeMarvin Leal looks very good. Very good. He looked terrible last year. He looks very good right now, which he's got so much potential. So I'm glad that he looks very good right now. You have Dean Lowry, who's a proven veteran in this league, Larry Ogunjobi and Cam Hayward. Montravius Adams is a monster. Logan Lee's a good developing rookie, and Keanu Benton is the next Cam Hayward, Casey Hampton, Larry Ogunjobi, Stephon too. It doesn't matter. You can name any of them. He's the next one. So I would say defensive line. And then, I mean, if you put TJ and Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig in there, it only gets crazier. So that would be, those would be my guys. Outside of that, inside linebacker looks very good. The interior offensive line looks very good as well. And I mean, I like the trio of Najee, Jalen, and Cordero Patterson. I think that one's pretty good too.
Let's go to Marlon, who asks, has Roman and or Troy been practicing at all this week?
So I'm not allowed to technically say if they've been practicing, and they haven't been practicing to the point. If they were doing team stuff, Nick, don't clip this. If they were doing team stuff, then they would be asked about it by the media. Mm-hmm. If they were doing stuff off to the side, then, maybe people wouldn't catch it except for one guy who's sitting there on the bench. So that's all I could say.
Let's go over to the next question very quickly that asks, can you guys please explain to me why Dan Moore Jr. is still the starting left tackle and why we're drafting tackles year after year if he's continuing to be on there? So what are your thoughts on Dan Moore continuing to have that opportunity?
I feel like I just blew out people's eardrums with how loud I laughed there just because you got me real good. I'm about to lose my credential over you guys. It's how much I love you. Dan Moore Jr. looks you need Troy Fautanu to be healthy before you could start making moves. But at the same time, Dan Moore Jr. looks better than he's looked his entire career. And to be totally honest, he looks like the best offensive tackle the Pittsburgh Steelers have right now. And I get it. Broderick Jones is struggling and Troy Fautanu isn't on the field, but I mean, you got to have a best offensive tackle. And right now it's Dan Moore Jr. So you're not going to make that move until Troy comes back. I would still imagine when Troy does come back, Dan gets benched and Broderick moves to the left side. But I think you're taking a risk because Broderick is raw and he's going to have some struggles. And I think Dan Moore is getting better by the year. So I don't think he's the best. I don't think he's a starter on all 32 teams. I think right now I'd start him at left tackle, see what Broderick can do on the left side when you start Troy, and then work Broderick in when he's ready instead of dealing with the mistakes early.
Let's go over to Steven's question next. He wants to know which players could the Steelers get back from injury by week 1?
By week 1, Troy Fautanu would be my guess. I don't believe Roman Wilson will be on that list. Just because, ankle sprains are tough. You just really never know. But if I had to guess, it's Troy Fautanu potentially, Corey Trice definitely, I would guess. But those would be the two, and then I'd wait it out for Roman.
Let's go over to Potato Salad. Says, what's going on, Nick and Noah? Got to read it like the intro. I don't know what intro you're referring to. Do we get a lot of two-back looks from Arthur Smith? Not a fullback and a running back, but two true running backs and a wishbone.
I would say there's some wishbone offense for Arthur Smith. I really would. I think that he works it well, especially with Cordero Patterson. I think he's going to work his way in there. Like, the way I look at it is, you're not paying somebody $3 million to return kicks. It's just, not going to happen. So I would imagine he plays some offense. I look at him and say that wishbone, yes. 2 running back sets, almost definitely.
Let's go over to PJ's question next. Why is the NFL so reluctant to expand the active roster past 53? The NFL preaches player safety, and having a lower player count makes it tough to take seriously. Is there a world where it ever expands?
So the reason that they don't do this is the same reason that they talk about player safety and then add games, or they talk about player safety and then, don't do anything about it, or try to hide things, or it's the same thing for everything. Safety's not the real issue. They could care less about it. Really what they want is the money. And the more guys you have on your roster, the more money you have to pay guys, which means that the more salary cap space you have to have, which means that, the bottom line is affected, and the NFL doesn't want the bottom line to be affected. They want to grow that bottom line, and the faster they're growing, they could care less about giving it back to these players. And in fact, when you stretch the thing, it's going to do things like slow down the growth of wide receiver contracts or quarterback contracts. It just makes it a mess. The NFL doesn't want to deal with that, so they don't really want to expand rosters.
Let's go to Leap's question, asking, better fit, Noah Brown or Tim Patrick, both released and available for nothing. Which one do you think would fit the Steelers better right now?
I would go Noah Brown as my better fit right now, simply because I think that the injury concerns of Tim Patrick worry me too much. If they weren't there, I would go Tim Patrick all day. I think he is a stud, but you missed 2 seasons in a row to an ACL and an Achilles. Like, your body's falling apart. Plus, you're 30 years old. It's just been a minute. But I would go Noah Brown. I feel like Noah Brown's a good option. People can't look at Noah Brown as like the number 2. This is it. He's better than Van Jefferson. He's just as good as Van Jefferson, which don't get me wrong. The Steelers only have George Pickens, Van Jefferson, a bunch of guys that aren't as good as Van Jefferson. So to have another Van Jefferson isn't bad, but he's not going to come in here and be a superstar.
Let's go to the next question here. After the 53-man roster, are you taking the over 8.5 wins and crushing the sports book for the Steelers?
Oh yeah. That's Rich, you've been on these streams long enough to know that I am as degenerate gamblers come on this sports book, or with these in this sports industry, and I will be hammering the 8.5 over. I always have. I already did, if we're going to be honest. It is my biggest bet every year, and when it hits, which it always hits, me and the wife, we get a nice dinner and we feel good for a couple of days there, feeling good. Up until then, she's not very happy about it. But when it comes, we're good.
Vibing with the Dogs says there's another center option that was released, Will Clapp. I think the Steelers should look at him. Here's my question. What centers should the Steelers look at, and what offensive tackles should the Steelers consider?
I'd have to really sit down. This is all coming real quick. You can only catch the big names as they come out. You'd have to sit down and really look at the offensive tackles who are now available, because there weren't many that were like massive. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe this one. And outside of Ricky Stromberg, there wasn't really. I mean, I don't really have. I guess Will Clapp's a good one. I didn't even see Will Clapp get released. I would like Will Clapp. I would go him still behind Ricky Stromberg, I think, but I would feel good about it. But tonight's the night where, and I know, today's when we're supposed to talk about this stuff, but we'll still talk about it tomorrow. So tomorrow or tonight's when I sit down after this and I really dive into it and say, all right, this is everybody. These are the list of the guys the Steelers should approach.
And that's a wrap for questions as of right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's a shocker. I was shocked. We've always got an hour. I didn't see it coming. All right. Well, with that said, guys, we're going to head out of here. If nobody's got any more questions, we're heading out. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work on. We got to answer it. You got to answer it. We got to answer it. It threw me off. 40 minutes threw me off. What's your favorite food? Is Italian food. There's no question. You can give me any Italian food. We're all about it.
Yeah, I concur. I think it's hard to go away from Italian food. Although, I don't know, I might take your Italian card away from you from a couple months ago, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day.
Where, Connor Williams. I was going to say, because somebody said somebody's getting ignored in here. Connor Williams is somewhere. Dallas, maybe? He definitely got signed.
I don't see anywhere. I mean, Seattle Seahawks. 2 weeks ago.
I was going to say, because he was reported to visit with the Baltimore Ravens, and then like the next day he signed somewhere else, because I was talking to Sports Illustrated's Baltimore Ravens reporter, and he was like, yeah, his agent literally just said that he's going to Seattle, and now he's in Baltimore. So that doesn't make any sense. Like, he's signing with Seattle. Now he's in Baltimore, so that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I would go with it. But all right, guys. Go ahead. You got an opinion down there. I know you do.
I mean, I wouldn't turn either of them down ever, but my grandma's chicken parm has a special place in my heart. I'm a sentimental eater, so she always made chicken parm, so I'll go with chicken parm. Although a good veal parm is hard to turn down.
A good veal parm, but the classic is a chicken, and I'm a big chicken guy. Although eggplant is also fantastic. Is that why you're a big picky pizza guy? 100%. 1 billion. I am the pickiest pizza guy of all time, but I'm not. I'll eat all pizzas, but I'll judge the heck out of that pizza as I'm eating.
You're just elitist. That's all. You're just a pizza elitist is what you are.
I am. This is what, look at, it's not my fault. I was born where I was born. I was raised where I was raised. Okay. Is not my, I wish everybody gets to, I tell people all the time, my mom gets mad at me. She says things like, why would you never want to come back to Jessup? And I'm like, I would never want to come back to Jessup, but I'm glad I grew up there, because now I understand what real Italian food is and how good pizza is. So, I'm just, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Should the Pittsburgh Steelers bring back Mike Hilton? He is in Cincinnati. He will never leave Cincinnati.
Yeah.
No, I actually saw something yesterday, and I know we're getting real off topic at this point, just kind of, rambling, but I saw something yesterday of a clip of his just doing the, questions or whatever that the social media team leaves up and the players answer as they walk by. And my thought was, it was the first time I thought Mike Hilton is going to retire a Bengal, not a Steeler. He's a Bengal. And that's crazy, because Mike Hilton was the first dude in the locker room that I was like, this guy's awesome. Like, I love Mike Hilton. I love talking to Mike Hilton. He's a good dude. Yeah. It was a big one. All right. I think with that said, we're going to actually head out of here for this time. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. As always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow afternoon to break down the first day of 53-man practice, all of the guys that the Pittsburgh Steelers make moves with over the next 24 hours, because there will be a lot, potentially, and what's to come with Pittsburgh, including, shout out Vibing with the Dogs, more options that I have sifted over for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go and approach over the next couple of days. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode. And as always, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.